Here's what bothers me about mental illness in the way that it's been covered so far. First, there's a lot of speculative diagnosing while this murder that was going on while this murderer was out on the loose. And, the fact that there were no solid facts about Dylan Storm Roof's actual mental health does not matter. And that's a problem because it perpetuates this myth of mentally ill monsters out there lurking and, ready to strike. And, the reason why I have a problem with this is that it perpetuates the stigmatizing myth. And on this show, we've covered the fact that millions of Americans suffer from some kind of mental illness, some minor, some major, and there's a lot in between. And when the public dialogue dives into this, speculation about mental illness and all of this myth making, it seems like, first off, this is the only time that we talk about mental illness. And then the time that we do talk about it, we're turning this person into a monster. Now, he's very much a murderer. Now, but whether he's this, mentally ill monster is yet to actually be proven. And the problem with monsterifying mental illness is that it continues to perpetuate the stigma for people who actually do suffer from mental illness. And we know the facts are that people who suffer from mental illness have very little to do with violence in this country. Only about 4% of violent acts in this country are committed by somebody who is mentally ill. But instead, what we see from big media and from a lot of people who, want to just continue speculating on that 24/7 cable news cycle is that there is this monstrous, mentally ill, person out there. And, and that somehow that mental illness is at the core of all of this. And there are consequences to this kind of stigma. It basically continues to punish people who might eventually want to someday raise their hand and ask for help. Because after all, when you ask for help, do you want to risk being identified as a dangerous monster? That is the danger of doing, so much, speculative diagnosing before you even apprehended, the murderer. Now, let's say, in the next 24 hours, we actually do learn, from law enforcement and from investigators that Dylan Storm Roof actually does have some previously undiagnosed mental illness. It doesn't change the fact that we were stigmatizing illness as this monster out there, rather than humanizing it. Now, that's not to say that I have any sympathy whatsoever for the actions of Dylan Storm Roof. I obviously condemn what he has done. It's a terrible, terrible thing. It's just that we don't really need to take the terrible thing that he did and then use it as an opportunity to once again punish the mentally ill. There is a way to talk about a lot of this without conflating the two. And the sad truth is that, let's say if Dylan Storm Roof has a mental illness, what we really need to be talking about in this country is that why did he have gun rights before he had health rights? Why is it that it was easier for him to get access to a gun before it was easier for him to get access to mental health care? What we really need to be doing in this country is be asking those parts of the country, like South Carolina, we need to be asking governors like Nikki Haley why they are doing everything they can to make it easier for people to get guns and making it harder for them to get health care, especially mental health care. Because, this morning, Governor, Haley has tears in her eyes and she's at a news conference and she actually said, "We woke up today and the heart and soul of South Carolina was broken. Parents are having to explain to their kids how they can go to church and feel safe." Governor, there are millions of parents and kids and thousands of doctors in America who want to know how and why you and your legislature continue to fight for gun rights and stop health rights. Because to me, that is one of the central issues of this tragedy, is that we seem to keep prioritizing gun rights as if that's a thing, that we keep prioritizing gun rights over health rights. And to me, the real illness that we need to be talking about right now is America's addiction to guns. There's no getting around this conversation, but we seem to. There's a lot of people out there saying that they have, that they're praying for Charleston families right now. And I am too. And I don't mean to put down prayer. And I don't mean to say that it's wrong to pray for the families. And I'm definitely not saying that we shouldn't be praying for them. Absolutely, we should be praying for them. Those families are in my heart. They're in my prayers. They're in my mind. And maybe actually, we should be looking at prayer a little bit more closely. And in particular, I'd like to look at a prayer used by some addicts and by some Americans who are simply trying to overcome some other kind of adversity. And that's that prayer. It's really familiar. It goes, I pray for the courage to change the things I can, the serenity to accept the things that I cannot, and the wisdom to know the difference. America needs to pray for the courage to change the things we can about gun violence in this country. We need to pray for the courage to admit that maybe owning 300 million guns is really that's too many guns. We need the courage to admit that gun rights are not real. Legal gun ownership in this country is a privilege. It's not a right. We need the courage to get real about that fact and completely rethink and rebuild how guns are owned in this country. But we don't like any of that. It involves hard work, taking responsibility, and awkward confrontations. So America might pray for courage, but they don't really want to use it. Instead, America is going to pray for serenity, to accept the things that we cannot change, because that sounds an awful lot like complacency. That's what I hear whenever I hear these calls for calm. Because when you're calm, you're not urgent. And when you lack urgency, you won't do all that hard work to stop gun violence. And the other thing about praying for serenity is that it sounds noble. Condolences are offered, and these myths of the mentally ill monsters, they get to be used as excuses. They get to be used as scapegoats from confronting what really needs to change in this country. Serenity means that you don't have to ask all the tough questions about why we have gun rights, but not health rights.